Imagine driving on a desolate road late at night, only to find yourself trapped in a surreal nightmare. This is the experience reported by many former and current employees of the Foundation who have unknowingly stumbled upon SCP-6819. In this video, we'll explore the mysterious properties of this anomalous location, the unsettling events that can occur there, and the risks of getting trapped in this haunted highway. So grab your seat and let's dive into the uncharted territories of this extra-dimensional SCP. Item Number: SCP-6819. Object Class: Header Uncontained. Special Containment Procedures: Research into the causes and effects of SCP-6819 and possible preventative measures are ongoing. Currently, Foundation protocol discourages travel from the hours of 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., unless absolutely necessary, in which case a party of 4 or more is strongly encouraged. If an SCP-6819 event is triggered, the driver should maintain a fast but safe speed and not attempt. Under absolutely no circumstances are personnel to ever stop, exit the vehicle, or approach the building. Description: SCP-6819 is a phenomenon occurring on highways in the United States numbered highway system. SCP-6819 involves the sudden translocation of a vehicle driving on a U.S. highway to SCP-6819-1, an extra-dimensional region of unclear bounds, and its subsequent return. SCP-6819-1 resembles a U.S. highway with all identifying signage removed and no natural illumination. The surrounding area is difficult to see and variable, but the area to the right will always be a gently sloping rocky hill. At the top of the hill, an unclear distance away, a large building is present. The exact physical characteristics of this building change, but all subjects report it as imposing or intimidating, with high walls illuminated by floodlights. Descriptions range from a prison to a castle to a military base, and similar facilities. The requirements for triggering SCP-6819 are unclear, but a few prerequisites have been ascertained. The driver of the vehicle must be currently or formerly employed by the Foundation. The vehicle must be moving independently, not towed or transported on a truck bed. The time must be between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., local time zone. The moon must be in a waning period. There must be no more than 3 passengers inside the vehicle, including the driver. SCP-6819-1 always contains an event forcing or incentivizing the driver to slow down or stop and exit the vehicle. The specifics of the event are never consistent. Instance number 56. Circumstances: 2009 Chevrolet Tahoe. Foundation issue: driver was Agent Mila Barrow. No passengers. US 49 in Missouri. Observations: SCP-6819 triggered at 12:17 local time. Agent Barrow reports she noticed the sudden absence of other vehicles, but did not consider it a point of concern and continued driving. A few minutes later, she realized her dashboard clock had stopped displaying, and her phone was no longer in service, and grew concerned at the continued lack of human presence. At this point, the building became visible. She recalled it was miles away on that hill, and she could barely make it out through the tree line. Agent Barrow continued driving, but prepared her service weapon. Several minutes later, the right lane was obstructed by the corpse of a large elk or moose being feasted upon by a significantly larger animal, possibly a bear. The bear's fur was extremely dark to the point of absorbing light around it, and had morphological alternations. Its arms were distinctly thin and long compared to the rest of it, like human arms. The prey was still alive despite the surrounding asphalt being coated with its blood, and continued to thrash and emit guttural screams as Barrow changed lanes and accelerated past it. In her rearview mirror, she reported the predator sitting on its hind legs and staring at her vehicle with glassy white eyes. Barrows exited back into local reality at 12:38, and immediately reported the incident. Instance number 165. Circumstances: 2004 Toyota Sienna. Driver was Dr. Adam Makovitz with his wife Dana Makovitz in the passenger seat. US 82 in New Mexico. Observations: SCP-6819 triggered at 11:34 p.m. local time. Dr. Makovitz immediately registered the sudden change in surrounding landscape despite the darkness, and attempted to check their location on his phone GPS, which did not work. A building became visible at the top of the rocky hill. To him it reminded of Side 16. Especially the huge concrete walls built into the cliffside and the big spotlights along the walls. Not wanting to wake his wife, Makovitz continued driving for several minutes. The building stayed at a static position with its spotlights panning over the hillside. He recalled that with the angle and his speed, it should have been getting closer, but it was not, as if it was moving parallel. Makovitz suddenly became aware of a movement to the left of the vehicle. Per testimony, it was a dark blot out in the desert, angled in such a way that I could see it for several seconds as we sped by. From everything around it, it was obviously a three-dimensional object, but since it reflected no light, you couldn't really tell. A couple miles later, I saw it again, but it was farther out so I could see it longer. It was moving at a constant speed, not the intermittent gait of something on legs, but the smooth pace of a wheeled object. It was moving parallel to the interstate at a much lower speed, and we shot by pretty quickly. I thought I was hallucinating. Makovitz then reports that the object reappeared ahead of them, moving perpendicular to the interstate. It crossed into their path, and Makovitz rapidly braked to avoid colliding with it, waking his wife. The object was no longer present, and his wife suggested she drive. Makovitz recalled that he was tired and a little terrified, but something in him was screaming not to get out of the car. They continued and the building disappeared from view at 12:09 local time, signaling their exit from SCP-68191. Instance number 306. Circumstances: 1977 Pontiac Firebird. Driver was Site Director Paul Legg. No passengers. US 120 in Pennsylvania. Observations: SCP-6819 triggered at 2:03 local time. Director Legg immediately noticed the sudden disappearance of other vehicle lights and attempted to call a colleague on his phone, but could not get a signal. He described it as a pretty empty road, but the tail lights of people way ahead of me, and the headlights of oncoming traffic could be still seen. One by one, they just winked out, like candles getting snuffed out. Legg was suddenly temporarily blinded by a bright light. A spotlight followed his vehicle for a few seconds before drifting away. Legg regained control of the vehicle and looked up at the building on his right. Believing he had taken a wrong exit, he made a U-turn and began accelerating in the opposite direction until the building disappeared from sight. After only 2 to 3 minutes, the building again appeared ahead of Legg, once again on his right. However, the tail lights of other vehicles were visible ahead of him, as well as the honking of horns. He registered the lights were not moving. The cars were all stopped in the right lane, causing him to switch lanes to drive past them. As he drove past, he slowed to take note of the traffic jam. All the cars were jet black and looked brand new. All of them had their hazards on and were honking at each other. None of them switched to the other lane until Legg drove past them. All of the cars were empty. Legg described that there must have been 30 or 40 cars, backed up and honking at each other with their windows down, and not a single person inside any of them. Legg accelerated to 130 miles per hour and exited SCP-6819-1 at 2:25 local time. Instance 398. Circumstances: 1999 Honda CR-V. Driver was Agent Alice Sterling, only passenger her pet golden retriever. US 95 in Nevada. Observations. SCP-6819 triggered at 1:15 local time. Agent Sterling does not immediately notice, but reports her dog immediately began to behave strangely and restlessly. The building does not become visible for several minutes, but Agent Sterling notes she began to hear a soft but high-pitched buzzing. He figured that this was what was making his dog nervous. He described the sound as snake rattle from outside the vehicle. Her dog began to whine from the backseat. Sterling noticed a discoloration on the road ahead and slowed her vehicle down as she approached. She noted a number of black cars stopped in a row in the left lane, similar to instance number 306. However, all the asphalt, guardrails, cars, and nearby rocks were coated in a greenish, shifting substance. As Sterling shifted to the right lane and slowly drove by, she was able to inspect them closer. Cicadas. Hundreds of thousands of them, at the very least. They were everywhere, buzzing and screaming and making the air shimmer. Sterling mentions that he did not believe cicadas ever come out this far west. Not in those numbers. He described that his car left a smashed trail of them and they didn't even seem to care. The brood of cicadas continued for almost a mile and a half, during which the building became visible much closer than in previous instances. He described it as safe and strong. He did not see any cicadas on those walls, despite the lights. She also noted an unpaved road diverging from the highway that led up the hill to the building, and moved to take it. At this point, her dog began to loudly and insistently bark, and she missed her turn. Sterling continued and exited SCP-68191 at 1:38 local time. Instance number 434. Circumstances. 2017 Ford F-150. Driver was researcher Samuel Sibar. No passengers, but Sibar was transporting a whole hog in the bed of the truck. US 123 in Kentucky. Observations. SCP-6819 triggered at 12:56. Sibar immediately noticed and unsuccessfully attempted to establish a radio connection with command, then rapidly accelerated in an attempt to exit SCP-6819 as fast as possible. He said he figured that since turning around does not work, the fastest way out was directly through. The building became visible within 1 to 2 minutes due to the speed Sibar was traveling at. Uncharacteristically, its spotlights were all fixed on a singular point down the road, instead of wandering across the area as usual. As Sibar approached the point, he noted an obstruction in the road and was forced to slow down. The twisted, flaming wreckage of a black SUV was strewn across the road, illuminated by the spotlights. He described it as gruesome. He believed it had crashed into the guardrail and the car was totaled. The people inside the car had been thrown through the windshield. A number of small fires were present throughout the crash scene, as well as a number of partially burned bodies lying face down on the ground. Sibar took the truck partially off-road to avoid the crash. One bloodied figure was lying several dozen meters away from the spotlights and wreckage, at the end of a long trail of blood and viscera. As Sibar returned to the road, he did not register this figure's presence in the darkness and crushed them under the wheels of the truck. The sudden jolt panicked Sibar and he accelerated to 110 miles per hour until he exited SCP-6819-1 at 1:09 local time. He described that he thought that somebody had jumped on the truck and he was going to die. After establishing a radio connection and reporting the incident to command, Sibar stopped at a gas station. He noticed the raw hog in the bed of the truck now had large chunks torn out of its flesh. Note: due to the particularly traumatic nature of this incident, Sibar was amnesticized upon request. The following is an interview between Dr. Seth Sainer and Subject Agent Barry Novick. The interview takes place in a hospital where Agent Barry Novick is severely injured and being treated. The sound of an EKG beeping can be heard in the background. Saner apologized to Novik for the wait and addressed him as Barry. Novik responded by saying that it was fine and that there wasn't much happening. Saner asked Novik to recount the events again, specifying that it was just for the record and without the need for excessive detail. Novik asked if they meant to go over it again. Saner confirmed that they just wanted the information recorded. Novik agrees and begins to recount the events. Novik says he was driving down 160 near Cortez. It was around 2 in the morning. Although there were a few other vehicles on the road, it was mostly deserted. Saner asked Novik when he noticed that something had changed. Novik explained that he noticed something was different when he saw his small compass on his dashboard acting erratically. He then realized that he couldn't see anything and that it was complete and utter darkness beyond the reach of his high beams, even though it was already a dark highway. He mentioned that he couldn't see tail lights, headlights, or even the moon. Saner continued with the line of questioning but was interrupted by Novik, who stated that it wasn't even darkness as he knew it, and that he wasn't afraid of the dark. Saner reassured Novik that he never said he was. Novik continued his statement, mentioning that he was afraid of the dark as a child and that he always slept with a nightlight in the corner of his room, which made him feel safe. Novik then mentioned that he saw a building. Saner asked him to describe it. Novik explained that the building was situated on the side of a cliff and was very imposing with large concrete walls and tall guard towers. He also mentioned that it was very bright, with the only source of light coming from the large spotlights and floodlights. Saner asked if Novik kept driving. Novik confirmed that he did and added that by that point he was aware of his surroundings, the situation, and what needed to be done, so he continued driving. Novik then paused to cough. Saner responded with okay. Novik asked if the spotlights always followed someone's car. Saner explained that it wasn't a common occurrence but had happened before. Novik mentioned that the spotlights scared him, so he sped up and was apprehensive about what might be in the road in the darkness. Saner asked if Novik saw figures. Novik confirmed that he did and remembered seeing around 4 or 5 people standing in the middle of the road, facing him. However, he found it hard to recall exactly. Saner asked Novik to describe the figures. Novik described them as white and naked, wearing black masks that covered their entire heads. They were holding objects, which Novik couldn't quite make out whether they were guns or bats. Saner then asked if the figures were doing anything. Novik answered that the figures were just standing there. Saner then noted that the lack of living individuals in SCP-6819-1 was usually a significant indicator, and asked if Novik was certain that the figures were people. Novik explained that the figures appeared to be people and that he couldn't confirm if they were alive, or even human, but they looked like it. Saner then asked what Novik did next. Novik explained that he wasn't ready for a confrontation, given that his car was a small Prius and he could have run someone over, but if they broke the window, he would have been in trouble. That's when Novik noticed the road. Saner asked what about the road. Novik explained that he followed a dirt path up the hill towards the building, as he thought it was a safer option than risking a confrontation with the masked individuals he had seen. Novik explains the uphill drive was bumpy but manageable. He shifted into second gear and drove up the road, but the spotlights shone on the car and blinded him. All of them shining down on the roof of the car. Saner asked if he stopped the car. Novik confirmed that he did and explained that the spotlights then wandered away from him and formed a line leading to a wall of the fortress, shining on a big door. Saner then inquired about the type of door it was. Novik explained it looked almost like a blast door. He then goes on mentioning that the whole affair looked like a bunker. Saner asks how it made him feel, to which Novik replies it made him feel weird. That it was a blend of feeling safe and scared. Saner asks what does he mean by safe. Novik explains that the light was comforting, and the walls looked very safe. He started to drive up to it. Saner inquires if he saw the door opening. Novik confirms and adds that just as the door started to open, everything went dark again. Saner explains to Novik that he passed out behind the wheel. The airbags were deployed when they found him in a ditch by the highway. He adds that they're probably gonna pull the plug sometime tomorrow and that his family will be taken care of. He apologizes to Novik. Novik stated that it was not Saner's fault and that he should have plowed through the masked individuals. Saner responded by saying that killing people isn't a natural instinct. Novik mentions that this was the thing and describes a scenario of driving through the dark and seeing a bright light, which one would assume is safety. Saner referred to the light as a nightlight. Novik agreed and added that the light shows that one is not alone, shining through the dark and calling them closer. Lastly, Novik then said the light was like an anglerfish. That was the end of the interview. If you get trapped in SCP-6819, it is not known what the consequences could be. The Foundation has not been able to determine the specific characteristics of the anomaly, or the events that take place within it. It is believed that the conditions within SCP-6819 are highly variable and unpredictable, which makes it even more dangerous. If you find yourself in SCP-6819, it is recommended that you stay inside your vehicle and try to leave the area as quickly as possible, avoiding any interactions with any potential entities or events that may occur.